In the quiet wake of World War II, the world leaders gathered under a veil of deceptive tranquility. As Churchill, Truman, and Stalin stood side by side at the Potsdam Conference, their cautious smiles belied the impending storm. Little did they know that the seeds of division were being sown, sprouting into an era of rival alliances, geopolitical chess games, and an intense race for global dominance. So, brace yourselves as we delve into the intricate world of international politics, the intricate dance between NATO and Russia, and how their actions might, against all our hopes, be hurtling towards a potentially cataclysmic confrontation. In this video, we're going to chart the journey from the birth of NATO and the Warsaw Pact, their evolution, expansion, and how their persistent game of power and dominance could, in a worst-case scenario, trigger a nuclear annihilation. Buckle up as we explore the story of NATO, Russia, and the dangerous game that continues to play out on the global stage. Can history teach us to avoid repeating its most disastrous moments, or are we doomed to fall into the same patterns of destructive behavior? When Churchill, Truman, and Stalin met at the Potsdam Conference to discuss the post-war world order, nobody expected that in just a few years' time, the world would once again find itself divided. Aggressive Soviet actions in Eastern and Central Europe quickly changed the Western Allies' opinion of the USSR, leading them to deeply mistrust Stalin's intentions. In 1948, when the Soviet-inspired coup toppled the democratic government of Czechoslovakia, bringing it forcefully into the communist camp, the Western Allies had had enough. So, in 1949, the prospect of further communist expansion prompted the United States and 11 other Western nations to form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. It was primarily a security pact, with Article 5 serving as the cornerstone of the organization. According to Article 5, an armored attack on any NATO member is considered an attack on the entire alliance, obliging other signatories to assist. NATO formed the backbone of the West's military bulwark against the USSR and its allies for the next 40 years, with its membership growing larger over the course of the Cold War era. Greece and Turkey were admitted in 1952, West Germany in 1955, and Spain in 1982. In response to the creation of NATO and the rearmament of West Germany, the Soviet Union in 1955 established its own security arrangement, the Warsaw Pact. Like NATO, the Warsaw Pact focused on the objective of creating a coordinated defense among its member nations to deter an enemy attack. The alliance also had an internal security component that proved useful to the USSR, enabling tighter control over the communist states in Eastern Europe and deterring pact members from seeking greater autonomy. But what happened with NATO after the US won the Cold War? Well, nothing. With the Soviet Union peacefully dissolved and the Warsaw Pact abolished, one might have expected NATO to cease to exist as it had fulfilled its original role, a decade that should have witnessed the creation of a freer and better world, and the abolishment of the Cold War mentality was actually a decade that gave birth to NATO interventionism, with NATO-led military interventions in Bosnia and Yugoslavia. Having outlived its primary reason to exist, it found a new one in enforcing the Western-led liberal order. It was to become an instrument of US dominance, enjoying its unipolar moment. Impoverished, humiliated, and only a shadow of its former self, Russia represented no threat to the US and its NATO allies. But that didn't stop NATO from incorporating former Warsaw Pact members and USSR republics. Gorbachev was explicitly promised that NATO would not expand east into the former Soviet sphere of influence, a key reason he agreed to German unification and the peaceful dissolution of the USSR. But NATO did, in fact, expand east. The original membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, consisted of Belgium, Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and the United States. Today, NATO has 32 member states and has expanded dangerously close to Russian borders. In 1999, former Warsaw Pact members, Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic, were officially admitted into the alliance alliance. 5 years later, Romania, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Slovakia became members. Russia was increasingly feeling agitated by NATO's expansion in its backyard, but was unable to prevent it. This expansion occurred at a time when Russia and the West had actually enjoyed rather warm relations. The collective West missed the opportunity to build a partnership with Russia, choosing a dangerous path of confrontation instead. However, with the intention of bringing Ukraine into NATO, the West pushed Russia too far, leading to the current situation we have today. We have seen an unprecedented escalation of tensions between Russia and NATO in recent years, only compounded by recent events in places like Ukraine and Syria, as well as cyber conflicts, sanctions, and diplomatic expulsions. As of 2023, we are also witnessing a geopolitical shift, with China's rise as a major global power and its increasingly close ties with Russia, which further complicates the dynamics. But how could that lead to nuclear annihilation? Let's travel back 100 years in history. In 1914, when Austria-Hungary delivered its ultimatum to Serbia, nobody believed that it could lead to a world war that would spell disaster for the continent. However, the alliance system in place, coupled with the mobilization procedures, meant that the situation quickly spun out of control. When Berlin gave its carte blanche to Vienna for its retaliation against Serbia, it certainly didn't expect to find itself in a war with Russia, and Russia thought that its firm commitment to the defense of Serbia would deter Austria-Hungary's invasion. They were both wrong. What if Poland decides to unilaterally send its troops to Ukraine and Russia retaliates by striking targets on Polish territory? The firm commitment to Article 5 would mean that Russia and NATO would find themselves in a war. And since Russia stands no chance against NATO in conventional warfare, it wouldn't be too long before the nukes started flying. You may think that this is a severe and unlikely scenario, but history has a way of catching us off guard. The rigid alliance structure and pervasive mistrust that ignited the Great War eerily mirror the situation today. Both Russia and NATO are deeply suspicious of each other's intentions, with the US and NATO keen on bringing Russia to its knees. NATO members have supplied thousands of pieces of heavy equipment and ammunition to the AFU. The arms and intelligence support to Ukraine from NATO members, coupled with training for Ukrainian recruits in NATO member states' territories, have only exacerbated these tensions. It's only a matter of time before longer-range precision weapons are supplied to Ukraine. And what happens when Ukraine decides to use them to strike targets deep inside Russian territory? The US and NATO repeatedly cross the Russian red lines, engaging in a dangerous game of brinkmanship, with Russia continuously pushed towards a corner. And when you corner a beast, it has no other option but to fight back. Russia is not yet pressed against the wall, but if the current trend of escalation continues, it will only be a matter of time before Russia takes drastic action. It could start shooting down US recon drones, targeting Western arms deliveries, or commit sabotage acts on Western key infrastructure. And if the West responds, things could easily spin out of control. The US and NATO have so heavily invested in the prospect of a Ukrainian victory that they're even willing to risk a nuclear confrontation with Russia. Let's be honest, Russia is not going to suffer defeat in Ukraine, as it would mean its end, even if that means having to use nukes. The window of opportunity for de-escalation is shrinking, and if the US and NATO continue their current policy, let's just say it won't end well for the world.